Hi everyone, Roy here. I thought I'd pop in to talk about my Victober pile of possibilities. So, Victober, as you probably know, is a month celebrating Victorian literature, and this being the 10th one, the number of hosts has been expanded to the magic number 10. And this is so delightful. I'm really pleased about it. I'm one of them, so I'm a temporary Victober host. And I'll link below to the people, to the introduction videos, that kind of thing. But with 10 of us, that means 10 challenges. 10, of course, is a relatively large number compared with smaller numbers, but you can use one thing for more than one challenge, and also short stories and poems are usually allowed, and some of them are kind of meta challenges that sort of glom onto the others, as you'll see as I work through them. And again, listed down below, and there's also a rather fabulous bingo card. I shouldn't say that because I did it, but a bingo card you can use to keep track of it all, because there's also levels of achievement. Of course, none of this is at all necessary. The whole thing about Victober is to enjoy something Victorian. So if you read a Victorian written book, that is to say British or Irish, written or published between 1837 and 1901, that's it, you're in the zone. You don't have to do any of this stuff, but I quite fancy the challenges. So let's get into them then. So Kate says, read a Victorian book where friendship is featured. So, jumping onto the short story train straight away, I found a story called My First Picture by Rosa Mulholland, who was an Irish writer, and I knew nothing about. It was published in a magazine called London Society, fits all the criteria, and it's about art students in London, and it looks really interesting. Oh, sorry, I should say, before I get stuck into the challenges, there's a group read as well. So, let's read Hester by Mrs. Oliphant. Margaret Mrs. Oliphant. Yeah, so this is another way to participate. I'll be doing this as well. So this is one of my longer reads. So yeah, we're doing Hester. Why I remembered that is Rosa Mulholland, as it happens, wrote a novel called Hester's History. So obviously there was a Hester craze in Victorian times. So where possible, when I make videos, I'm going to sort of explore some other tangential bits and pieces as well, particularly Victorian magazines, but more about that later. So that is challenge number 1 from Kate Howe. Katie's challenge, Katie Lumsden, Books and Things. Read a Victorian work of literature that is not a novel. A play, short story, poem, work of non-fiction. Well, I've got something that isn't a novel that might well contain all of those things, and that's a magazine. Again, I really like magazines. So I'm using a lot of willpower not to open this until October. This is an issue of Pearson's magazine. So this was an illustrated monthly, and contained lots and lots of interesting fiction as well as articles and such, and lots of photographs and engravings and such like. So I figure actually reading a magazine from cover to cover would certainly meet the challenge, and probably got some cool stuff in it. So all I know so far is we will have Doctoring by Machinery. We will also have How Animals Sleep. So they sound good. And nice zodiacal picture of Libra there. It's relatively rare to find individual issues of magazines, and especially one in such good condition. So this has got all the stuff in it, stuff that's usually cut out of the bound sets, like the adverts and that sort of thing. So really looking forward to that, Pearson's. Okay. Then we've got Marissa's challenge. Read a work of Victorian literature where a character experiences a change in class, status, social mobility, rags to riches, fallen women, etc. So I've had a look for fallen women stories, and Lizzie Lee by Elizabeth Gaskell seems to have been quite a prominent one. Again, it's a novella really. It was serialised over 4 issues of All the Year Round. And then published in a book, Lizzie Lee and Other Stories. And it was actually made into a play as well, or at least there's a play apparently loosely based on it, which I haven't been able to track down, because reading the play script as well as the novel would be interesting. I know someone who might be able to help with that, but we'll see. So Lizzie Lee there's fallen women in that, or a fallen woman. Sounds really interesting. Elizabeth Gaskell, good. Then Ros wants us to go empire spotting. Right, so the British Empire, not just any old empire. I've actually got a handy map of said empire. So the map with the British Empire countries in pink, which used to be a sort of thing, and flags. So this is from Arthur Mee's Children's Encyclopedia. So this is actually from 1908. So okay, this itself doesn't count, but it's handy reference, and I think Arthur Mee was very much had Victorian sensibilities. I can't believe the empire had changed that much. So I've got a handy reference point. Obviously I'm not going to stick pins into this book, but I might do a copy and find some way of charting what I find. So references to empire could be very direct, I suppose, sort of involving things happening in those empire countries. But then there's quite a lot of what they call reverse colonialism, sort of stories where some sort of threat, like a deadly plant or a sort of fearsome assassin, come from one of these colonies and onto our shores. So there's that sort of thing. I'm wondering if the exhibitions, they had these great exhibitions at Earl's Court and Crystal Palace that had exhibits and people from many lands. Maybe they crop up in stories as well. So basically it's a sort of spot things as you go kind of challenge. Although if I wanted to put myself into harm's way, as it were, I suppose I could read Dr. Jenny's book The Adventures of Captain Kettle by Cutcliffe Hine. So maritime adventures, I've read quite a lot of them, and yes, if you want to see empire, you'll be living it in these. In fact, he was a staple of Pearson's magazine. Very popular writer at the time. Okay, so got the Empire Challenge going on. That looks like a riot. Elizabeth's Challenge. Read a work by an underrated Victorian woman writer. So not one of the Brontes, not Elizabeth Gaskell, not George Eliot, not Elizabeth Barrett Browning, or Christina Rossetti. So in a sense, I will already have done that with Rosa Mulholland, I suppose. I've got an idea for a sort of crossover with the other event I'm doing in October, Occult Detective October, which is to read a novel called Lady Mary's Experiences by Ada Maria Jocelyn. That's her married name. I don't know much about her. Again, like people who wrote many novels, as well as probably a great slew of short stories, are like pretty much forgotten. She sometimes goes by her maiden name as well. Yeah, that looks good. I gather it's about a woman who becomes fascinated by ghostly manifestations and sort of it becomes her thing, which kind of makes her an occult detective. So we will see. The author also wrote a book with a brilliant title, £200,000 versus Ghosts, which I haven't been able to find. Anyway, yes, so Lady Mary's Experiences and Ada Maria Jocelyn will be my underrated Victorian woman writer. Moving on to Hannah's challenge, read a Victorian work that discusses education. My thoughts tended towards L.T. Mead, basically because I like to fit Mead into any challenge there is. And also, if I was trying to sort of do this, one way of doing this would be to read a book that covers lots of challenges. So something like The Rebel of the School has friendship, it has class mobility, as a sort of a foundation school girl goes to a sort of a private school, basically. And obviously it's about education. I've read Mead. In fact, Hannah recommends a Mead book, I think A Sweet Girl Graduate. I did read that a couple of years ago and it's really good. That's a university one. She wrote loads of school ones as well as lots of other stuff in other genres. But I'm thinking of something completely different. Maybe I'll fit the Mead in if I get a chance. Alfred Lord Tennyson, The Princess, is a poem. It's this long, and it features a women's university. So the action involves, I presume it's the titular princess creating the ideal university that's women only. And of course, at the time, there was no such thing. And there's some kind of men infiltrate it through dressing up as women. Could sound a bit like old Tennyson taking the mickey out of this crazy idea, but I've got evidence that women, actual women, kind of owned this and would do readings and tableau vivant of it and things like that. So we will see. Tennyson, The Princess. Jess's challenge, step back in time. Read a Victorian work set in a different era. Okay, well, I've had this. Arthur Conan Doyle wrote about a character called Brigadier Gerard. So these are set in Napoleonic war times, and the stories were collected in 2 books. And I've read the first book full, so basically this paperback now has all of them. I've read the first book full. I was thinking I could read the second one, which I'd like to, but they kind of move into the 20th century. I could probably get away with it, because there are no Victober police, so who cares, but also because it's a series that started in Victorian times. I think that would work. But in any case, given that I'll be limited for time, I could at least read the one that I have left to read that was written in Victorian times. So one of the stories was written and published magazine-y wise in like 1900. So there's Queen Victoria living, doing all those living things, breathing, stuff like that. And there's a Brigadier Gerard story coming out, historical, fits the challenge. Okay. Different era could also include the future, although the challenge might not be worded quite that way, but we've established in one of our meetings in the secret Victober headquarters beneath Buckingham Palace that you could get a story from the future as well. So with a bit of luck, I will read The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Clearly not very long. In fact, due to it's got one of these back in the days when the penguin had been punched in the stomach by the look of it. What am I talking about? I don't know. Oh yeah, I might read this in advance as a shorty September thing, and kind of to, in the run up to Victober. Okay, Milena's challenge: spin a digital colour wheel. Pick a Victorian book with a cover that primarily features that colour. You can pick any edition. So I really recommend checking out Milena's video, because she has made a brilliant physical colour wheel to spin, which is a lovely, lovely thing. I haven't done that, but when I spun, I got red. And sitting right where I'm sitting now and peering around, I saw a book that is massively red. So quite literally, The Elephant in the Room, with a copy of The Open Door and Other Stories of the Seen and Unseen by Margaret Oliphant. So more Oliphant. You can never have enough Oliphant. These collections are lovely. I guess if I'd got silver, I could have counted this as well. Edited by Mike Ashley, published by British Library. I think I just said that. And there are 6 stories. A surprising number of authors wrote supernatural stuff as well as their, realistic books. The Secret Chamber, Earthbound, The Open Door, The Portrait, Dies Irae, The Library Window. Fantastic. So all or some of those. That's my red colour. So the idea of any edition is just to make it not impossible. You find a book you want to read that has at some point, not necessarily the one you own, but has at some point been published with the colour. So say you got yellow, any book that's ever been a yellow back could count. Okay, so you could have The Woman in White, for instance, because that came out in that format back in the day. And, there's all those orange penguins. Virago used to publish everything in green livery. So that's how it works. So it's not too arduous, really, but it's a fun way of choosing a book. Right, what next? Mine. Okay, yes, so my challenge is read a work of Victorian fantasy. So I'm pretty keen on George MacDonald, Lilith, or possibly Fantastes. So he wrote 2 works of adult fantasy, separated by a long time, 37 years, I believe. Lilith is the second one. People seem to think it was the better of the 2, but if I can get hold of the first one, I will. I have got a copy of it. I think the books I was waving around when I was talking about this challenge in my announcement video are from something called the Ballantine Adult Fantasy series. So these were paperbacks that came out in the 1970s. Presenting a lot of it was reprinted fantasy, and there's lots of Victorian and 19th century works in there. So it was like doing a course in fantasy, really. But the books are getting quite rare now, so I don't really want to be messing around with it. Which is why I've got this Lilith, which is rather nice, and it's got an introduction by C.S. Lewis. So that's probably what I'll read for that. Again, I'm tempted by some William Morris as well. Look at that. So this is a copy of the Story of the Glittering Plain that's been reissued in a series that looks at books that Tolkien definitely had and was therefore probably influenced by, or maybe definitely influenced by, maybe said, "Way, Morris." So Morris often gets credited with being the sort of first one to have an imaginary world, or what Tolkien called a secondary world, where the story takes place. And and this is replicating his own Kelmscott Press edition, right? So as well as being a writer, he was a designer, and had firm ideas about beauty and utility and all the things coming together. I've always thought that his books are, just as the illustrations and the typography are there to bring out the text or complement the text or communicate the text in the most excellent way, so also the text is written as the kind of story that would appear in a book like this, if you see what I mean. So I think it's all of a whole: the design, the production, the writing. So it will be, I'm sure, a medieval type fantasy written in archaic lingo. Again, given its relative shortness, I could slot that in advance as a shorty September thing. That only leaves one, Catherine's challenge, which, as Catherine's channel is called Tea with Catherine, that made me think I should get something for my TBR. So I had a look at like Victorian or Victoria inspired teas, and a lot of them seem to be some species of Earl Grey, and I don't like the flavour of bergamot. But this, Victoria, is produced by a company. It's basically merchandise for the Kinks, the band, the Kinks, who did a song called Victoria. That's really good. And of the 3 types of tea they make, Victoria is one of them. So that's my my cup of tea for the event, and to have something to drink it in. Talking of William Morris, I got a little William Morris teapot, because usually I'm a bag man. But obviously that's loose tea, so pot with accompanying little cups. Yes, those are my drinking. That's my drinking strategy. Anyway, for the event, a connection to Jane Austen. Jane Austen died before Victoria came to the throne, so she's not Victorian, but the Victorians went mad for Jane Austen, so she kind of had a big resurgence. So that means there's essays, there's literature that's influenced by her, and we can take a pretty expansive view of this. It could be something that reminds us of Jane Austen in its style or tone, as well as stuff that actually is like about her. Of course, this was before. It wasn't like today, where you get stories where Jane Austen is a detective or something, or fighting zombies. It's a little bit more straightforward than that. So I was having a look around, and one thing I found was something called the casket of literature. So, so first of all, you get the cool Victorian way of spelling the word casket, which I will definitely use from now on for all the times I need to write the word casket. So the Casket of Literature was a series of books. There's 6 of them, 6 volumes, and it's like excerpts from good quality literature. So its sort of mission was for the new speeded up age to give people like distilled doses of great literature, so they weren't going to miss out in their speedy, trains and what have you, machines, all of that. You've got your proper literature still in bite-sized chunks, and it was sold like a to give it its full title. Sorry, as usual, I'm starting 2 sentences. I'll finish them both eventually, I expect. The Casket of Literature, a selection in poetry and prose from the works of the most admired of authors, edited with biographical and literary notes by Charles Gibbon. So, and it was sold like, sentence number 1, it was sold like encyclopedias, so subscriptions. I've seen adverts in the press from the time the intelligent young man wanted to sell the casket of literature in Huddersfield, say. Yes, and there's a Jane Austen excerpt in here, one of these, I think volume 5, I think. But, I didn't really think, I can't really read like Part of Persuasion. That didn't feel like it would quite meet the challenge. The little bit of biographical and literary notage didn't really qualify, and a sort of reading the whole book. Interesting though that would be as a kind of example of the kind of stuff that Victorians thought, or at least a Victorian thought, was the literary canon. Would be interesting, but it would take ages because it's pretty densely set. There's a lot of words in here. They're very proud in their marketing materials about talking about, there's 1,000 authors. So not that. Then I found out something by Andrew Lang. Andrew Lang, who produced the Coloured Fairy books, who at one point collaborated with Henry Rider Haggard on The World's Desire. Really good novel, which would work really well for my fantasy prompt. Andrew Lang had not only had his own logo on the books, he did a book called Letters to Dead Authors, originally owned by somebody called John W.G. Bond. And it is what it says. Obviously, Jane Austen is one of them, otherwise it wouldn't work. So he writes these letters to dead authors, which I'm told are written in the style of the addressee, so the notional recipient, whether it be William Thackeray, Charles Dickens, Pierre de Ronsard, Herodotus, Mr. Alexander Pope, Lucian of Samosata, Rabelais, Jane Austen, Isaac Walton, and so on and so on. There are 16 of them. No, there aren't. There are 22 of them. Yes, so A Letter to Dead Authors by Andrew Lang will be my Jane Austen tie-in. So if I can do all 10, I would have reached the Dracula level in the achievement scheme, but I'm sure it will slip a bit, but I would like to at least edge into the Sherlock Holmes level, which requires 7 to 9 prompts to be finished. Okay, so bit of a TBR from me. Do check out other announcement videos, and also follow the tag. There's going to be lots of cool stuff happening. So that will be my Victober 2025. Alright, back soon with something else.